Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday from the Be Our Guest Podcast Studios. Getting ready to record Mike in the Midwest. Just getting the final touches put here on the notes. Pull this up here. Close that there. It is so cold and raining here in St. Louis. It's rained for about 36 hours, and it's like 40 degrees. It is a cold rain. Had to run through it this morning for my run. Was not enjoyable, but I'm trying to get this badge on my Apple Watch for 200% of my move goal for an entire month, except you got to get 30 out of the 31 days. So I'm going to try to get that. Also, I've set a personal goal. I tried to do it in September of running a half marathon every day. I missed it by one day because I had that migraine. I had to go to the ER on the 19th. So I said I would try to get in October. And so far, I've got 2 more days and I'll be able to say I ran a half marathon every day in October. So we'll see. It would also be 60 out of 61 days. My knees hurt. We'll see if we can make it. All right. Today, Mike in the Midwest is going to be all the vehicles that I have owned. That's right. Hey, Phil, you're at the gym. See, now you got to be tough like me. I should go to the gym. I didn't feel like getting up earlier and heading to the gym. I just ran outside. I had 2 of those head covers on. I forget what they're called. They had the mask built in, like the football players were under the football helmets. I had 2 of those, not because I wanted to stay warm, because I didn't want my AirPod Pros to get wet and ruin those, because those were a gift from Christmas. They were expensive. I didn't want them to get wet. So I was sweating about doing anything to keep when I'm out there at 5:30 in the morning, it's dark and raining. I got to have something to listen to. Got to take my podcasts. Not our show. I was listening to a recap of Big Brother. So remember, pump that iron, run those laps, whatever you're doing, Phil. All right, let's talk about the vehicles I've owned. This will show exactly how old I am, because I am old. Feeling older and older every day. All right, let's do this. Excuse me. Welcome to episode 19 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Mike Rallman from beourguestpodcast.com. So glad to have you here on a Thursday or whenever you're listening to the show here on your podcatcher. Thank you so much for being a patron of the Be Our Guest podcast. Again, I say this every week and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Without you guys, we couldn't keep the show going while travel is what should we say, in flux. I mean, a lot of us are still trying to travel, and we're traveling in small doses. We're traveling when we can. I sure appreciate that. I know some of us are still not comfortable with that, and I respect that. My dad is a big traveler. Of course, he works or did a lot with the St. Louis Rams and the radio network, but he's older. I mean, so he's being very careful with his travel, and he's somebody that goes out there all the time. So I get it. If you're kind of waiting until things start to return to normal, maybe we get a vaccine. So just hang in there. But I hope you are doing well as we close out October. We have Halloween on the horizon here in about 2 days. And of course, next week's election, or next week, we have the election happening, and then we'll have Thanksgiving here in the States before you know it. We've already had Thanksgiving up north, and it's going to be a busy time here as we close out 2020. One of the things I'm very excited about that we had this opportunity, that it's making me very excited, because in 2020, we're looking for signs of hope. We're looking for signs of normalcy, and we're looking for ways to make the best out of a rough situation. One of those things that we get to do, we've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, is we get to go down to Give Kids the World Village on December 5th. We get to do the live show that we normally do over the summers, but it's been kind of weird the last year and a half with us moving, a lot of other things happening in Pam and Ricky's lives. But we get to go to the village on December 5th, and we're going to broadcast live from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., 6 hours straight of the show. Of course, we're going to be taking your donations for Give Kids the World. That's what we do. But what we're going to do is bring you the Night of a Million Lights from the village. And we're going to take you there. We're going to walk around the village with video so you can see everything that's happening. We're going to interview folks at the village, like Steven. He's you'll see him on the video if you go to the Give Kids the World website. He's always at the Indy Disney meet. He's kind of the mouthpiece of the village in getting their message out. He used to work for Disney. He's just a wonderful gentleman. So we'll get to talk to him. Hopefully we'll talk to Pam Landworth. She always comes on with us every time we do a live show. Of course, that's her baby, the Give Kids the World. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be taking your calls from the village, lots of fun games and so forth, like we do on our 12-hour shows. So it's something to look forward to. So if you can be there, you can buy tickets now on their website at gktw.org. For December 5th, you can be there right with us in the big room where we're going to be broadcasting from. I know a lot of listeners are going to be there. But if not, join us here on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be bringing you the magic as best we can. 2020 has been such a rough year on many of us. My life was changed a lot. My wife is teaching currently right behind me in Paige's bedroom, teaching 4th grade. Definitely different. We didn't see this coming this time last year, but what a way to kind of, help somebody else out. Even if we don't have a lot, even if we give $5 to Give Kids the World on December 5th, we're not going to have the expectations that we normally have for our fundraising. But hey, every little bit helps, and it just makes you feel good on the inside, right? When you know that you're helping a struggling family. We're going through a lot with quarantine, all of us, right? But the families that need the services of Give Kids the World, they're going through a lot more than we are. So if you can, kind of ease that pain just a little bit by maybe, helping to give an experience that takes the family away from that for a day, a couple days, a week, it's going to be an amazing opportunity. So I just hope you put that on the calendar, because you guys that are supporting us here, you're the best of the best. Honestly, you're kind of in at the highest level. And I love you guys so much. You've taken care of me. You've helped me keep my dream going here with the show. So I just want to let you know that I hope you can join us and just get in on the fun December 5th. So do put that on the calendar, 2 to 8. I know we're up against college football. Trust me, I know, but we'll make it happen. The kids are more important than college football. And there's not a lot that's more important than college football to me other than my family. All right, let's get into today's topic. We're going to have a good time here on Mike in the Midwest. Before we do that, though, we talked last week on episode 18 about Halloween memories. And I do want to always give feedback at the top of the show from the previous show. Again, you can always leave your feedback right here on the video on the Patreon page. You can also leave it under the audio podcast page, or you can email me if you have feedback, and we'll get that on next week's show. Already up to episode 20. I can't believe it, next week. But Andrea Gardland said, thanks for being a patron. She says, I'm a huge Peanuts fan. My husband bought me the box set of the Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas specials years ago. I love the fact that you shared those timeless classics with your students. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that, I don't know, as a 6th grade teacher, and I guess this was me being kind of egotistical, because, our school that I taught in for the majority of my career was kindergarten to 6th grade. So I had the oldest kids in the building. Pam, my wife, taught 6th grade next door. There were always 4 6th grade teachers, but Pam and I were 2 of them. And the kids kind of always wanted to be in our classes because we were the younger of, I'm not young anymore, but we were the younger of the 6th grade teachers. And Pam and I would team up and do a lot of cool community service projects with our students. We'd always do a food drive at Thanksgiving for the community. We'd always just kind of try to find things that, while we still taught math, science, social studies, reading, writing, all the stuff, character building, all the stuff that the district required us to teach. We were always, personally for me, I was always looking for an opportunity to teach culture, right? To teach citizenship, to teach things that were not in the explicit curriculum. There's a lot of things that we had to teach. They had to know how to do, the 3x3 multiplication by the end of 6th grade, stuff like that. I mean, that's basic. That's easy to teach. But I think there's a lot of lessons, as weird as this sounds. It's important that those 6th graders were exposed to the Charlie Brown Halloween special right before they went out trick-or-treating. You know what? Because before I sent them out the door, I gave them a couple of small things to remember if they went out trick-or-treating. Not all my kids went trick-or-treating, but some of them did. It was just the opportunity to say, if you go out and go trick-or-treating, wear a costume, wear something, because we'd have kids come to our house with zero costume, just like demanding candy, like they were holding us hostage or something. Put something on, give a little effort. But more importantly, if somebody gives you candy, say thank you, right? Even if you got a rock like Charlie Brown, say thanks and go to the next house, be a good kid. And I think that was an important thing. And it was always fun just to talk about, my kids didn't know what bobbing for apples were. Bobbing for apples is in the Charlie Brown Halloween special, but it's fun to talk about like what things were like back then and to kind of honor how things have evolved from, a 1950s Halloween to a 2000, back then a 2005, 2003, 2010 Halloween. But it was still fun to have the conversations, keep kids safe, travel in a pack, watch the street, don't hang out in pumpkin patches after dark by yourself, or your sister might have to come out and find you, all that kind of stuff. But, there are always ways to kind of make sixth grade fun. Because I think as a teacher, the thing the kids will remember most, honestly, and I've heard this from years and years from my students on Facebook now. They're adults now. I remember watching Charlie Brown Halloween before we went out trick or treat. I remember the historical person project where we got to all dress up, but you made us dress up like somebody in history. So that was always fun. So thanks, Andrea. I'm glad we got to share that. Heather Hayden, thanks for being a patron. She says, the one and only time I did Halloween horror nights at the park that shall not be named, the heart rate function on my Fitbit practically exploded. It was a great event, but not for a chicken like me. And trust me, the workers probably enjoyed it way too much. But yeah, Halloween houses, haunted houses are fun. We didn't do any this year because everything's hard this year, but maybe next year, because Mallory's at that age. I really want to take her, right? She's 12. So next year, we're going to take her to some of the scarier ones. And then Sean Johnson, thank you for being a patron as well. He says, I did some looking up after listening. 1988 Monday Night Football. So in 88, this was probably the year I was talking about because I was born in 73. So 88 I would have been 14. So this maybe not. He said Monday Night Football was on Halloween night. The Colts crushed the Broncos 55-23. Eric Dickerson scored 4 touchdowns. So no, it wasn't a great game. But I do remember that there were nights where Halloween and Monday Night Football fell on the same night. You would come home and watch Monday Night Football while you're eating all your candy, the first go through there until your stomach hurts, and all the fans would have costumes on. They'd always have those the graphics would have, skeletons and pumpkins and stuff. And I know that sounds weird, but I like during the fall season on football games, especially as you get close to Thanksgiving, I like the cornucopia on the lower third for the graphic package, or, pumpkins. And then as you get closer to Christmas, they have the garlands. So I love that stuff. I know, not a big deal, but that's stuff I like. Okay, let's get into today's topic before we run out of time. And I haven't even started. Today, I thought we'd talk about cars I've owned, vehicles that I've owned since I started driving at the age of 16. Now, there is a Halloween connection into one of these vehicles, and we'll get to that story here in just a second. So and in the state of Missouri, you can get your driver's license at 16. And and the weird thing is nowadays, I think a lot of kids don't really care to get their driver's license like right away. Dude, from the time I was like 10, I was counting down the days till I could get my license and drive a vehicle. My grandpa would take me after church on Sundays from the time I was about 14 up to the junior high, which was actually in the parking lot of where I ended up teaching at Wedgwood. It was adjacent, and I would drive that parking lot. So I knew how to drive like at 14. So I was all practiced up because on Sundays, nobody was in those parking lots and, there was no danger. So that's what you would do. You'd go to a parking lot at a shopping mall back in the day. They were closed on Sundays. And you would learn to drive, and I think the cops would just leave you alone if you're in a parking lot. So anyway, on my 16th birthday in November, I skipped school. This is what everybody does. Back in the day, you would skip school on your 16th birthday. You would go to the Department of Motor, or the testing department. I don't even know what it was, just a place where you went to take your driver's test. For me, it was up in a place called Cross Keys Shopping Center. And you would go in and they give you like an eye test, and they'd give you the written test. Now, also back then, I don't even know, I don't think Paige took this class in high school, and she graduated. Well, she was born in 96. So she graduated a while back, about 6-7 years ago now. But, we took driver's ed just as it was like you took PE. I mean, everybody took driver's ed in high school, and I graduated in 92. So you would take driver's education in your sophomore year, and it was a semester class. And so you spent a lot of the time in the classroom learning the rules of the road, basically learning all the stuff you would need to pass the driving test, right? but there were also simulators at our high school. So you had this whole simulation room, and you would go in and sit in these things. Kind of looked like a cheap pole position game, right? The old environmental cabinet, the sit down, and you had a big video screen on the front of in the front of the class, right? And so, but I remember the videos were actual films. You know, they were on the rolls, so they put the film on. You would drive along to the video, and somehow these things were all. This was pretty, I guess, for like the early '90s, late '80s. These were pretty technology, high technology, because somehow they gave you a grade as to how quick you reacted to like hitting the brakes or putting on your blinkers, turning the right way, not speeding, and stuff like that. So of course, we'd always try to screw up on purpose and get in trouble. The teacher would be like, "Look, dude, you got a terrible grade. Like you're driving 92 in a neighborhood. The speed limit is 25, so you get in trouble for that and so forth." But I do remember that the one last video for driver's ed was a video called "Critical Situations" or something like that. And so I still remember this. Mr. Salinardi he was a coach, but he was also the driver's ed teacher. Isn't that how it always worked in high school? Anyway, so Critical Situations was, you go in, you'd be driving through a neighborhood, and then out of nowhere, like an 18-wheeler would come and plow into you, and like, you'd have to hit your brakes. It was just a disaster after disaster. And the thing was, like, I thought it was hilarious. Like, some of the girls in our class were like freaked out and crying over this, because the like ultimate almost car accident in the simulator, Mr. Salinardi takes this stack of these big metal film canisters and throws them on the ground. Bam! And they just crash. And so it's right as you're about to go under like an 18-wheeler's trailer, and you're in the simulated car, and I guess get your head taken off. I don't even know. Like, you could not do this in school right now. No way. Like, trust me, I worked in the educational system. You're not allowed to hurt anybody's feelings. This scared the crud out of everybody in the class. The lights were out because you had the film on. Everybody was driving their simulators. He cracked up. People were like peeing their pants, like had to go to the nurse. It was just a mess, but I do remember that. That's how we learned how to drive. So anyway, when I was 16, skip school, go take your driver's test, written test, eye test, go out in the car with some kind of an instructor. Got to do your thing, got to parallel park. But yeah, I passed on my first attempt because I was ready. I took my mom's 1987 Pontiac Grand Am to take the test. That car was actually pretty hot for like a family car. That car was pretty awesome. Like this red Pontiac Grand Am. It was kind of a neat little thing. Had a lot of pep for a 4-cylinder car, but got my driver's license. So the first car I really drove was a Pontiac Grand Am. It was my mom's car. My dad at the time also had a 1985 Ford Ranger pickup truck, like a light duty pickup truck. Now, this was a stick, but again, when I was 16, I didn't really have a car immediately. I had my mom's car, my dad's car. And I remember one day my mom was gone and I was working at the roller skating rink right after I got my license. The only car there was my dad's truck, and it was a stick. Now, I kind of learned how to drive a stick because I'll tell you about what my car that I got to drive full time. But my dad told me, he's like, "Well, you kind of know how to drive a stick." I'm like, "Yeah, but the skating rink is on Lindbergh Boulevard." And if you don't know, every town's got one. Lindbergh Boulevard is the road that has all the stoplights and all the fast food places and all the businesses on it, right? It's not a highway, but it's like a state highway. And you got to stop and start 100 times to get to the skating rink. And that's the hardest thing in a stick, right? When you're 16, he's like, "Well, you can I'll drop you off, or you can take my truck and you'll figure it out." So I'm like, I want to drive myself. So I figured out, I killed the truck a couple times on the way there and on the way home, but I figured it out. And the reason I kind of knew how to drive a stick is because my first car that I actually got to kind of have most of the time to myself now remember, I was born in 73, right? My first car that I really had full time was a 1971 MGB convertible. Now, if you don't know what an MGB is, I'm going to try to describe it. Look it up, and I'll try to put a picture somewhere here in the Patreon. It's like a Mazda Miata, only smaller and way less reliable. Now, we bought this car. My grandpa bought this car actually from a guy that he did construction work with, This guy lived way out in the country. I mean, nothing was around. He just lived way out in the country, and he had this old MG. It wasn't running. It was all broken down. My grandpa bought it for $500. Now, the funniest thing is he bought it when I was 12. When I went back and thought about this, we bought this MG from a guy that lives, and he still does, about 3 minutes from where we live right now. Because when I was younger, when I was 12, where we live right now was totally farmland. There was nothing out here, but now it's like the hot suburb of St. Louis. So yeah, we bought it back on Independence Road. Didn't run. I remember we had to put it on a trailer, bring it home. And the fun thing was, the reason this MG was so special, it was bright orange. It was like a pumpkin. It was awesome though. The couple reasons why I love the MG, and we still have it. My uncle has it in a garage down in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. After my grandpa passed, he took it and kept it down there because I gave it back to my grandpa when I moved on to something more practical. But the thing was, we bought it when I was 12, and grandpa and I would spend time out in his garage. He had a heated garage, kind of a separate building from his house. And we would work on it over the winter, over the summer. You know, we got it repainted. We got body work done. We got the tires fixed. We got the interior redone. And we worked on this for about 4 or 5 years, kind of together. And he tinkered with it as he retired, and he let me drive it. Now, grandpa, before I drove it, he would drive this thing to church on Sundays. This was his church car. So my grandpa, you had to know my grandpa, he was a spiffy dresser. I'll have to find some pictures of him too. And he had a jelly roll hat. You know, like, I don't know, like golfers wear, kind of like the old style golfers. Like if you see, you know, golfers that are in knickers, he had the jelly roll hat. He only wore that when he drove the MG, and he would park the sucker right dead in front of the church on Sunday. So you couldn't miss it. Bright orange convertible coupe MGB. And so you knew grandpa was there. Of course, he only drove this in the nice weather, but yeah, he was an usher. So he'd park right in the front, and he'd greet people to come in, you know, shake people's hands as they left church after church. But grandpa drove this thing on Sundays. Well, the thing is, they had 3 cars. So grandma had a car, grandpa had a pickup, and they had this car kind of sitting around. So grandpa let me drive that forever. And it was so cool. I mean, you got to think about this. In high school, I had a coupe convertible 2-seater, and this thing was peppy. Now, MGs broke down all the time. Didn't have a battery in the front of the car. It had 2 batteries behind the seats. So when you had to jump it, you had to jump it from behind the seats. It was a big mess. But when it ran, I mean, for one thing, in high school, just to have a car was awesome. But to have a convertible that was a coupe, and it kind of looked like a Porsche Boxster, to be honest. God, we had so much fun. We'd drive that thing to Six Flags, which was about 45 minutes away. We drove that thing all over town. I played Legion baseball, which meant I played baseball games all summer. We had about 80 baseball games a summer after high school was over. And your games could be anywhere within a 150-mile radius of St. Louis. And so we'd play double headers. So I'd drive a thing to Marissa, Illinois, which was like an hour and a half away, Springfield, Illinois, way out country places in Missouri. I drove the wheels off this MG, and it was so much fun. So finally, though, as winter gets around, right, it's a fun car, but I mean, MG sit about 2.5 centimeters off the ground. The winter comes around, and you just want something a little more practical, like something that keeps the heat in. And so I made a deal with my parents. If I got straight A's for a semester, and I always got close to straight A's, but if I did definitely get straight A's, they would get me a reliable vehicle. And I got a 1985 Buick Skyhawk. It was black with red interior. And this thing was pretty nice. I mean, it wasn't like a sports. It was practical, right? It was a Buick, but it was like the cheaper kind of a Buick. But I did like that car. It had put a nice radio in it. That's what everybody had in high school. You had to have kind of a booming radio. So we put that in there, and it was nice in the fact that it was a hard top. It had a nice heater. It would start when you start it up. You know, the MG was always like 75-25, whether it would start. That thing was very, very just temperamental. Had to be nice weather kind of thing. So I got Skyhawk, and I drove that around through the end of my high school career, and it was a nice little car, but the one thing about that one was parents always tell this to their kids. My grandpa used to tell us to me, and my dad used to say this all the time. When's the last time you checked the oil? Now, you're a parent when you start asking that, right? Have you checked the oil lately? Well, I didn't. And I said I did. And so, yeah, so I blew the engine out of the Buick Skyhawk. But, once I did that, I couldn't afford to get a new car. So what I did was my dad helped me find an engine rebuilder. So we took this thing down into North St. Louis, where it's dangerous as anything. They took the car for about a month, put a new engine in it for, hundreds of dollars, but not thousands for a new car. And I remember when we went to the cashier's window, there were bullet holes all around it. That's one of the things I do remember. But I did get the engine rebuilt and got that fixed, and I drove that for quite a while. Now, I only had 3 more cars since then. I haven't owned that many cars. So after that, I bought myself, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I remember I saved up, got my first checking account. I was working at the skating rink. And I bought a 1987, a used car, 1987 Ford Ranger pickup, kind of like what what my dad had. He had an 85 Ranger. I bought an 87 Ranger pickup truck, very practical. And this was a nice vehicle. Super nice. I bought it at the used car lot. And it was just, it was a very practical vehicle. And I had it for years and years. Now, the thing I remember was I did buy this right at the end of high school and into college. And I remember that I had to get an auto loan for this one. And I remember my payment was like $183 a month. And it was freaking me out to know that I was obligated to pay $183 a month for the next 4 years to pay for this truck. Now, within a couple of weeks of this, I think I've told this story before. My sister and her best friend won a $25,000 Mustang convertible on the radio. It was the 25th anniversary, cherry red, all the options. They won this car on the radio. So my sister's 4 years younger than me. Her and her best friend won just a brand new cherry red, all the options, 25th anniversary Mustang. And here I am freaking out about buying an old used pickup truck. Life isn't fair sometimes. But anyway, my sister ended up selling her half of the car to her best friend's dad, because neither one of them could afford the insurance on a Mustang because they were 16. And so the dad bought the car from the girls. My sister got some money. She bought an Escort, wrecked it, bought another Escort, wrecked it. So anyway, I'm more careful. So I got the Ranger and I drove that forever. Now, one of the things I've always wanted, even from the time I was 16, I always wanted a Jeep Wrangler. My grandpa told stories about Snowball. This was his Jeep Wrangler he had back in the day. This one I was like 8 or 9. He'd tell all the grandkids, oh my gosh, I wish I still had Snowball, the old Jeep Wrangler. It had big tires. It had all the stuff on it, the winch. And so, I wanted to be like Grandpa. I love Grandpa. So I always wanted a Wrangler. And my dad would say, no way, you are not getting a Wrangler. My dad would not let me get a Jeep Wrangler because if you don't know, Jeep Wranglers, they're really safe and they're really dangerous at the same time. They're safe because they have like roll bars and, they're very strong vehicles, but they're dangerous because if you go around corners too fast, like they're very easy to flip, right? So if you're not careful when you're driving them, you can roll them over rather easily. And of course, the greatest part about having a Wrangler is you take the doors off, you take the top off, basically you're driving just a cage down the highway and it's so much fun. So anyway, once I was, had my teaching job, I saw this Jeep Wrangler. It was a 1995 Wrangler at the used car lot over by the school where I taught at Wedgwood. And I kept driving past. It was a bright blue Wrangler, big tires, the big knobby tires, just looked awesome. And it sat there for a couple of weeks. I'm like, that truck I'd paid off the truck. It was getting towards the end of its life. And I was like, I'm going to try to buy that. So I did go over to the car lot. I bought a Wrangler and God, I was so proud of that thing. First thing I did, this was after my grandpa passed away. But the first thing I did when I bought it, I drove it to Grandma's house and I showed Grandma and I said, Grandpa would have been so proud that I have a Wrangler. Now, my dad wasn't super happy, I'm sure. This was my dad's dad. But Grandpa would have loved that I now have a Wrangler. So I got my grandma. Now, again, she was older, of course, and this Wrangler set up pretty high. So I had to help her get up in it. I took her to get ice cream. So we took her up to Fritz's. We got some ice cream. And she was so happy riding around in a Wrangler because that means she rode around in Grandpa's Snowball back in the day. So I was so proud of that Jeep. I drove this Jeep forever. I had it. It was in 1995. I got it in around 99 or 2000. And I drove it till 2012. This is the Jeep that when I worked at Space Camp, I would commute every weekend back to St. Louis to play sand volleyball and to hang out with Pam. This is back when we were dating. So I drove a Wrangler with fat tires. This thing did not have air conditioning, had a cheap radio that worked some of the time because the face came off. But if it wasn't sat in there just right, it wouldn't work correctly. And I drove this. It got 4 miles to the gallon because it had a big engine and fat tires, 4 miles to the gallon, 7 like on the highway. So it was 4 non-highway, 7 on the highway. I remember that because I did clock it. And I was driving back and forth from St. Louis to Huntsville, Alabama, once a week for 2 months for the summers of 2002 and 2003. And I didn't care. I loved life. It didn't matter. Like, so I was almost spending more on gas than I was making in a week down at Space Camp to work. I didn't care. It was awesome. I love this. I do remember it was blue. And when September 11th happened, I do remember the greatest thing was like I took these big American flags, taped them to the roll bars, and it was just kind of a celebration of, I'm proud to be an American and I love our country. So finally, in 2012, I get up to my current car. These are only all the cars I've owned. And I didn't own the Grand Am, the Ranger of my dad's. The MG was really my grandpa's, but he let me have it. So I've really only owned 4 cars. And this is the one I drive still today. I finally got my first new car in 2012. And that was another Jeep Wrangler that I bought down in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. I found it online. It's where my cousin lives. He knew a guy that works down there. And it's just a black Jeep Wrangler, but this one's deluxe, right? It doesn't have the half doors. It has full real doors. It has air conditioning. It's not a fancy Jeep. I mean, if there's a lot of fancy Jeeps out there, you could really trick them out. This is a basic Jeep. It's a Wrangler Sport, which is the cheapest edition, but it has air conditioning. It has heat. It has real doors, not just half doors, but it is a convertible. It's got the soft top, and it's just a lot of fun. And I've always said that when I get another vehicle, it's going to be another Wrangler. Wranglers to me, and my daughter Mallory loves Jeeps as well. She says when she turns 16, she keeps thinking she's going to get a 4-door white Jeep Wrangler. Yeah, she needs to dream on because those are like $40K. I can't afford that, but she can keep dreaming, right? But here's why I love Jeeps. Just as I close this out, Jeeps are kind of the ultimate fun car, right? They're good in the snow. They're fun. They're different. Now, a lot of people don't like them because they're loud. They ride rough. And I admit that they are. But they're kind of like a truck, if you like a bigger vehicle that sits up high. They're a convertible. Now, you got to work hard because to convert them, it's not easy. You don't push a button like you do on fancy cars. You got to get up there and tug and tuck and unhook stuff and unzip windows and all that kind of stuff. But they're fun. They're easy to customize. And I've just always kind of enjoyed it. And a Jeep is a very American vehicle, right? Jeep stands for General Purpose Vehicle. If you didn't know that, the Jeeps started in 1941 in World War II. And so I like that. It's kind of a celebration of America by driving a Jeep. Maybe it's a stretch, but I do love our country. I love our country. And I think it's kind of a fun thing to drive. And it kind of takes me back to the good old days in my Jeep. So those are the cars I've owned. Now, here's what I would like to get from you guys today. In the comments below, you don't have to go through your whole chronological history of your vehicles, but tell me about some strange vehicle or maybe your favorite vehicle from the past that you had that you wish you had back. Like that MG. I am going to redo that MG because my uncle has it. He doesn't really want it anymore. When I have a place to put it, I'm going to freshen that baby back up and I'm going to drive it. I'm going to drive that thing because that thing it's going to be 50 years old next year. I had so much fun in that vehicle. I'm going to fix it up and just drive it on Sundays in tribute to my grandpa. But what was your vehicle, or what was the vehicle you never had that you wish you did? My dad always wanted a GTO, a Pontiac GTO. If I had the means, if I ever won the lottery, I'd buy him a GTO to fix up or one that's already done. But mine is that MG, and I'm glad that it's still in the family so that I can someday fix it up. Well, thank you so much for dropping in for Mike in the Minute. Oh, I forgot to tell you the Halloween story, right? Because it's Halloween Saturday. So in the MG, one of the things we did was it was bright orange. I mean, bright orange. And we had a Halloween parade at our high school at Hazelwood Central. And so the couple of years that I had it, I always drove the MG in the Hazelwood Central homecoming parade. And I always got to take the homecoming queen right there in the back of my car. So that was always fun. Grandpa actually drove one of our Valley of the Flowers, which is our whole city of Florissant celebration in May, one of the queen candidates there in the parade as well. So when you have an MG or when you have a convertible, you get to go in parades a lot too. All right. Well, hope you enjoyed today's episode of Mike in the Midwest. Thank you again for being a patron. If you have a suggestion for a future Mike in the Midwest, let me know. I'd love to do that. And for next week, for the first show in November, we're going to kind of change it up. I would like to do a Ask Mike Anything. Any questions you have, We'll answer those on next week's Mike in the Midwest. If you have a question for that, ask Mike anything about my growing up here in Missouri, anything about the podcast, anything at all you want to ask to get on the show. We'll have an Ask Mike Anything. We'll switch things up on next week's show. So put those in the comments below, or just send me an email or leave a message here on Patreon. So until we get together again next Thursday here on Mike in the Midwest, we got lots of podcasts for you coming up here on the main feed. But until we do this again, I love this show and I love you guys so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Halloween. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Everybody have a good Thursday. Have a good lunch. Bye.